Namaste, welcome back. Mindful Serenity Yoga, or waking up in a busy world. And once again, we're going to pull a question from the jar, and I'm going to attempt to answer this question within a 10-minute time frame. I'm doing this mostly for myself so that I can assimilate my learning and can help with my ability to answer questions on the spot. I am going to start my timer, and hopefully it will have some benefit for some of you. Now, the question that I am asked, whoa, and I have a hard time saying. Why would learning to observe non-judgmentally be good for someone with a busy mind and hyperactive emotions? Why would learning to observe non-judgmentally be good for someone with a busy mind and hyperactive emotions? Question. Okay, I restart the timer. Take a deep breath. Wow. Observing non-judgmentally for a person who has a busy mind and hyperactive emotions. Well, the busy mind is something many of us have. The busy mind is the fact that statistics show that 60,000 thoughts a day, mostly, in the most average human being. And 85% of those are said to be negative, 90% of those are said to be repetitive. So we've got this loop recording going. So most of us have a busy mind. Some people have an even busier mind if they have conditions like anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder, which is a form of anxiety where they're constantly thinking thoughts that they're trying to counter with rituals or behaviors. And then we have busy mind for people who are just plain stressed out from work or relationships, or I think what makes the busy mind these days too, which adds to the busy mind, is this constant influx of stimuli that we're putting ourselves through with electronic devices going all the time, screens, the noise in our environments, the hyperactive workforce requirements. Everybody's expected to be on guard, going, completing and achieving. So all those things are socially induced almost, or at least aggravated by our society, our busy minds. So yes, many of us have busy minds. So, and then the individual says hyperactive emotions. So there's some conditions, some mental health conditions that lead to hyperactive emotions. Anxiety itself can be considered emotion and hyperactive. But then we see some emotional emotional dysregulation disorders and things like borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, bipolar disease. There's some mental health issues that do have a lot of emotional dysregulation to them, and emotional dysregulations is the inability to control our emotions. We get to a certain level and then we fly off the handle, and it's like our emotions control us rather than us just observing our emotions or experiencing our emotions. Our emotions determine our lives, more or less. It becomes a part of our mind that we listen to. If we're upset, well then there's a reason why I'm upset, and so we look for reasons to be upset. And instead of having a thought that comes in our head followed by an emotion. So there's some individuals who have that hyperactive type of emotional dysregulation. And I'm assuming that this is what this individual means. So why then, is the question, would non-judgmental observation be beneficial to these individuals? And non-judgmental observation is the key for the practice of mindfulness. And mindfulness is all about bringing ourselves from our heads back into our bodies, back into our surroundings, back into this present moment here and now, and allowing, noticing, and allowing and accepting what is in it as it is, without trying to change it or manipulate it as the busy mind would want us to do. And for someone who has a busy mind, it would be very beneficial because it's going to step by step help us to get out of the busy mind and back into our moments and back into our bodies and back into this experience of living here and now. When we're in our busy minds, we're all up here. We miss so much from the world around us. Things can be happening, we may not even notice them, especially if they're neutral. If they're very unpleasant, we tend to have, when we have a busy mind, we tend to be looking for the unpleasant so we can figure out a way to how to avoid it. And we're looking for the pleasant experiences in life so we can grab them and cling them to help, so they can help us make us feel better. And we tend to ignore the neutral experiences of life, those things that we bypass on a day-to-day basis without even noticing they're there. And it's in that noticing of the neutral where we hit what the Buddhists might call the middle way, that way between the pleasant and the unpleasant, and the clinging and the grasping versus the averting and pushing away, where we just experience life as it is. We can learn to observe the neutral without judging it as right, wrong, good or bad, should be or shouldn't be. Then we are on our way to calming that busy mind and bringing ourselves out of our heads. And without all those judgments, the mind is never as busy, and a lot of that busyness that we have going on in our heads is this judging and this needing to know what should be and shouldn't be, what's right or wrong, what's good or bad, what should I avoid, what should I cling to, type of thing. So without that judgment, when we observe the world that's happening to us and around us right now, non-judgmentally, we are going to bring ourselves out of our busy minds. And we're going to start noticing things we may have not noticed before and start appreciating them and enjoying them. The neutral experiences of life that don't take us here and take us there. So why would that be beneficial for a person who is hyper emotive or has emotional dysregulation? Wow, just think about that. Without the judgment of wrong or bad or shouldn't be, the person might not have the anxiety or this idea that they have to avoid that, and all that anxiety that's produced and that worry that's produced about that happening in their lives, and what will they do if it happens, will be diminished. So the emotion of anxiety may be reduced. Bad, wrong, shouldn't be in a person whose emotional dysregulation could lead to severe depression, severe anger, severe resistance. So when we can get that judgment out of what we're observing and just observe without that judgment, that removing the good, the bad, the wrong, the shouldn't be, we're going to see that person's being able to regulate their emotions better, because the emotional component will not be triggered by the judgments we have in our heads. So when we learn to observe the world around us non-judgmentally, without putting those labels on it, without just seeing it as it is, then we will not have that tendency maybe to react emotionally. It will not trigger those emotional tornadoes and hurricanes that sometimes can come with these conditions. So when we talk about observing non-judgmentally, we're going to observe very neutral scenes that don't have the tendency to trigger us, that don't have the tendency to make us judge right, wrong, should be, right or wrong, good or bad, should or shouldn't be. They just, what we would normally not even notice. So we have less of a chance to be triggered by those situations. So we start with very neutral scenes. And then we can experience other scenes that might have, pleasant scenes that may cause a sense of pleasantness. Because we don't want, in non-judgmentality, we don't want to be going from negative to positive. We want to see all things as neutral in a sense until we regulate our emotions and regulate our busy minds, so that we're not pulled in either direction. Because whatever can be positive can just as quickly become negative, and whatever can be negative can just be quickly as positive. We don't want to go from one extreme to the other. We want to stay in the center, stay in the middle way. So that's where the neutral comes in. So we could start observing things that are very neutral in our environments and in our situations, and just spend 1 or 2, 3 minutes just observing something, and then watching the judgments. Just see, you're going to have less judgment if it's neutral, and just observing your reaction to the neutral. And then you can advance a little further by observing a scene that might have a pleasant effect, and then noticing how you see it as pleasant, and noticing your own judgments, because we need to be able to observe our minds just as much as we need to be able to observe the world if we want to heal from these conditions. So we start with the world and start with the situations that are around us that we see as the triggers. And then the more we neutralize and the more we pull away from judgments of the pleasant and unpleasant, good, bad, wrong, right, should be or shouldn't be, the less of a triggering effect these other situations will have on us. So we expand our observation from the neutral to the pleasant, and then we observe the unpleasant and sit with the unpleasant in a very mild form of unpleasant at first, and we can advance to more and more things that maybe would have triggered us in the past. Expanding our awareness, expanding our observation, expanding our awareness of how they've triggered us in the past and the feelings we have inside. Then we learn to sit with our feelings that are uncomfortable and unpleasant, and that eventually, in the long run, without judging ourselves for those feelings, without judging the feelings, or just seeing feeling as feeling that comes and goes, we'll eventually be able to calm the mind, the busy mind, and even help to not get rid of our emotions, because we're part of the energy of who makes us who we are, but we'll be able to sit with our emotions without trying to avoid them, suppress them, or repress them, which is toxic. And we want to be healthy, allow our emotions to just flow through us the way they're meant to. Well, as you can see, my time is up. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that answer helped. Namaste.